Well, since we're at the final part of our video, I figure let's not waste too much time and just get on with the show. So, I'm also starting this part with another movie featuring a lot of little small characters, but one that's kinda underrated, and that's... While those certain words aren't the exact way to describe this film, I still find the Lego Movie 2 to be a pretty damn good sequel. It's a film that often gets labeled as not very good, but especially after watching it again, I don't think it's a bad movie at all. Just not quite as good as the first movie. I'm sure you can probably already guess that just by the placement of where this film is on the list, but yeah, it is admittedly a downgrade from the first movie. Nothing too extreme, but there are plenty of aspects the first movie just got down way better. Starting with maybe the story itself, which I hate to say spoilers for the first movie, but you really can't discuss much about this movie without spoiling the first. So maybe skip ahead if you somehow haven't seen the first Lego Movie by now. Of course, the reveal of the first film is that it's all part of an imaginative journey created by some young boy. And because the boy now has his sister being able to access the Legos, the allegory of this film deals with a sibling rivalry of different genders. Some people have an issue with the film having a real world element to it, but I don't mind that in and of itself, especially with how they handle it. Where it leads to issues is that this second Lego Movie isn't as clever or subtle about its real world allegory stuff. With the first film, it was pretty subtle about the connection with the real world. Just vague talk about the man upstairs, giving kind of an idea, but you don't really know for sure until the twist is actually revealed. Here, the names are a little too obvious, like the Sistar system. Gee, I wonder what that is. Even in terms of filmmaking, the first film had brief hints of the reveal visually, but they appear for like a fraction of a section, and still vague enough to keep it a mystery. Here they linger on some of those illusions a little too long, to where you know a little more where it might be going this time around. I think the makers of this movie are definitely aware that everyone watching this knows the twist of the first, so they didn't really feel the need to hide it, and they do poke fun of the obviousness of it here and there, though it still feels like maybe they could have been a little more clever at hiding what exactly the thing is. It would have been better if there was more subtlety to it. Plus, another downside with this movie, some of the characters from the first don't really have much to do, with 3 of them being practically gone from the film. Lord Business is just regulated to just a few lines, Bad Cop only has one brief cameo, and Vitruvius is nowhere to be seen. Plus, other characters like Metalbeard, Unikitty, and Benny are just kind of there for the adventure. They don't really do that much to contribute to the plot. So character-wise, it might sound not so good, but they end up making up for it with some of their new characters, which definitely adds to this movie being a pretty decent film. You got General Mayhem, who's a neat foil for Wildstyle, Rex Dangerfest, a fun, interesting new partner for Emmett that has an interesting story to him, and Queen Whatever Watanabe, a crazy shapeshifter that's the potential antagonist of this film. They all add a lot of neat elements to this movie, with Queen Watanabe being especially a great highlight. Tiffany Haddish can be one of those actresses that might be overplayed, but she really gives a lot to this performance, with a lot of good comedic timing. But she also benefits from some great animation. This film is no stranger of being visually impressive like the other Lego films, and Queen Watanabe is one of the best animated because it's clear they had a lot of fun making a Lego character just be expressive by changing themselves to whatever they want. It's very creative, especially during the song sequences, which, yeah, unlike the first movie, this one is actually more of a musical this time around. My theory is that they made the sequel a musical after the only Oscar nomination the first movie got was for Best Original Song, so they decided to add a bunch of more songs to compensate for that. Thankfully, these songs are actually really good, thus making this the second best musical of this ranking. We'll get to the other much later. There are a ton of neat songs here, and while some are just still variations of Everything Is awesome, you got some pretty good original tracks, with Queen Watanabe having 2 fun musical numbers, and even a great end credits track by Beck and the Lonely Island that I might like just as much as Everything Is Awesome. Mostly for how funny this song is as an end credits song.
It's the credits, yeah, that's the best part. When the movie ends and the reading starts, you can keep your adventure and all that action. 'Cause the credits of the film are the main attraction.
It makes for an all-around catchy soundtrack. I mean, how could it not when you got a song that's literally just... Though I think the main reason I put this movie as high on the list as it is, and why I feel it's a pretty damn good sequel, is because of how it handles its themes. The first Lego Movie's themes were definitely a highlight, and this one doesn't try to retell those themes, and instead discusses something else, which is the idea of toxic masculinity. Now, I know some of you are probably going to be groaning at the utterance of that word, and it can be very easy to shrug it off as a buzzword. However, the way it's done here is actually, dare I say, pretty mature and smart about it. Without revealing too much, because this movie wasn't seen as much as the first film, Emmett eventually gets to a point where he wants to be seen as more mature and tough as a person. Though that ends up being a downfall, as the desire to become more mature and tough gets the better of him, as he starts becoming more aggressive and not pleasant to his friends around him. This leads to him ultimately kind of ruining things for everyone in the process, as his destructive behavior could have been solved more elegantly and in a nicer way. Sure, it can be, for lack of a better term, cool to act macho, but you still gotta be reasonable. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit more of a diplomatic and nice way of handling things. You shouldn't let your desire of being more mature get the best of you, because that leads to more immaturity, ironically enough. What's smart about this message is that Emmett isn't the only one who learns something here. Wildstyle also learns about this kind of stuff too, as she initially gives Emmett this expectation that he has to be this tough, edgy dude in order to be taken seriously, when that expectation might be too much, and also unnecessary, when there's nothing wrong with Emmett's kindness to begin with. It tackles these themes very well, because it doesn't just regulate it to grr, men bad, women good sort of thing, and instead tackles it in a way that I feel kids could actually understand well. They can learn as cool as being edgy can be at times. If you go too extreme with it, that can ultimately lead to you losing your sense of empathy that the worst adults can lack. So in the mix of toxic masculinity, it's still a movie where the theme is also still have your sense of childhood. And this kind of stuff works so well for something like the Lego Movie. Again, this isn't nearly as good as the Lego Movie. For as good as the themes are here and how well they handle it, it's not perfect either. There's some aspects that contradict each other and can get confusing thanks to time travel shenanigans. I don't want to get into too much detail since this movie wasn't nearly as big of a hit as the first movie. Not to mention the first Lego Movie's overall theme was better suited for the brand. However, we'll get to that film a little later, cause there's of course way more to say about it. As far as Lego Movie 2 goes, it's still a good sequel, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. Don't let the perception of, oh, it's not as good as the first film get to you, because on its own merit, it's still a blast of a movie. The best way to describe it is by paraphrasing a song from the movie itself, as Lego Movie 2 isn't quite awesome, but I say that's more because things aren't always that awesome all the time. It's an unrealistic expectation, but golly, the Lego Movie 2 still tried to make everything awesome in a less idealistic sort of way. They aim for not bad here, cause not bad? Well, that's actually great, and that's a good way of describing the Lego Movie 2. Pretty great. Check it out for yourself if you haven't. And no, if you happen to not like this movie for whatever legit non-petty reason you may have, that doesn't make you a misogynist. However, there are other films I may recommend more that have an emphasis on girl power, including the next movie I just so happen to be talking about now.
The city of Townsville. But enough about that.
Well, if Teen Titan Go, the movie, makes it on here, I feel stupid for not including the better Cartoon Network movie between the two. The Powerpuff Girls movie is certainly one of the best of the whole trend of TV shows becoming movies, if you ask me. Might sound somewhat biased, since I'll come right out and say it, I do love the original Powerpuff Girls show. Then again, who doesn't really? Even then, I still say this movie managed to represent its show very well, even despite the fact that this isn't a finale to the series. Instead, they make this feature film an origin story of the Powerpuff Girls, and I can kind of see why they went that route. One of the faults of TV-based movies for some is that they're not really welcoming to newcomers of the show, so I can understand them wanting to make this movie an origin story to help establish these characters for people who aren't as familiar with the Powerpuff Girls as longtime fans. Though at the same time, it can also be a little unappealing for fans of the series, since when making the series into a film, it's all about making a bigger, grander adventure that's almost peak of what the series should be. So to have this movie be an origin story might sound like a bit of a cop-out, especially since this is the Powerpuff Girls, a TV series where the intro already gives a brief explanation of the premise very well. Hell, there even was that one episode that discussed their origins even further by revealing how exactly Mojo Jojo was involved with the girls' creation.
It was me. It was me.
Yet, this movie ends up working really well despite that. And I say for a few different reasons. The way the origin story is told this time here is actually fairly compelling, thanks to how they do a good job making these characters, dynamics, and situations feel authentic to the Powerpuff Girls. Where other episodes that talk about the origins clearly makes it seen from the perspective of someone, whether it be the girls or Mojo Jojo. Here, they let the events play out for themselves with no real narration or perspective. It does a good job giving the audience a view of the origins without a clear manipulation of it. We also see that the girls aren't instantly liked at first. You know how people complain about superhero movies having too much destruction with no repercussions? Well, here they address the damage they might have potentially caused in this film, and how much of a backlash these characters got from the rest of Townsville. It adds more stakes to the story, seeing that we actually have to see these girls prove themselves that they're the true heroes of Townsville. When you get to that point, it becomes pretty satisfying to see the Townsville folks also learn to come around on the girls, even if it is predictable. Also, smart move to have Mojo be the main villain here, as his whole motivation and journey to become the evil mastermind he is now is a perfect contrast to the girls' more humble beginning. Again, seeing how it all started out works well because they make it feel like it's the natural origin of these characters to the fans of the show. To the point where, as a fan of the show, I would not mind showing someone this as their introduction to the series. The other reason why this movie works is because it manages to be a big upgrade to the show. It still has the same crazy over-the-top style and cartoony nature to it, just on a much grander scale. And I say it's a great spectacle to watch. The animation is quite great here, being the perfect upgrade to the series by still retaining its old designs, just making everything bombastic and action-packed. Same goes to the music as well, which the Powerpuff Girls always had a good theme song, but hearing it with a big orchestra just adds to the epic feel that this movie has for fans of the show. Plus, I shouldn't fail to mention the voice acting here, which, unsurprisingly, it's all the same original cast, and they all do a great job reprising their roles. The real highlight being Roger L. Jackson as Mojo Jojo, who's already been great as this character beforehand, but for this movie, he really relishes in being the maniacally evil monkey we all know and love. He goes above and beyond to make him feel like the massive threat that he is to these girls. It feels like the entire cast and crew of this show really wanted to make something bigger than what they're used to, and they succeeded quite well. Even taking the show out of it, this is still a really unique stylistic animated movie that we hadn't really seen much of in theatrical form. If there's anything that's a real bummer regarding this movie, is that this never kicked off a trend of more theatrical Cartoon Network movies. The movie was unfortunately a box office bomb when it came out in 2002. Whether you want to blame it on being released at a competitive summer season, the girl marketing, or just the basis of being a movie based on a show that was arguably already getting tiresome for some people, the film's financial performance didn't seem profitable for other Cartoon Network shows to get this treatment. Not until about a good 15 years later when Teen Titans Go had their own movie. And honestly, that's kind of a shame. As someone who loved Cartoon Network, it would have been so awesome to see so many different CN shows getting the same huge theatrical big scale treatment that still would have been very unique and cool to see in the mix of other animated films. I mean, Nickelodeon had a decent amount of animated films based on their shows. Why does Cartoon Network only have to have the two? Oh well, at least we got a decent amount of good TV movies based on some of these awesome Cartoon Network shows to make up for it. Though, that's a topic for a different day. Overall, the Powerpuff Girls movie, whether you love the show or just a casual fan, is truly worth your time. The show still holds up as well, and this movie does serve as a good peak for the show. The series never got to a point of awfulness in the same vein of other long-running animated shows. Well, at least not until much later. But this film is still a great reflection of how impactful the Powerpuff Girls brand was to the world. An excellent way to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Cartoon Network, as once again, Warner Brothers' reputation in regards to animation is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. I always wanted to do that.
Are you nuts? You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Lego Batman. If there's another DC related movie that deserves to be on this list, that satirizes superhero movies in such a fun way, it is definitely this movie. Sorry, Teen Titans Go. The Lego Batman movie is ultimately a spin-off film that doesn't really tie into that much of the Lego universe, but that's okay, since this film's main goal was to be one gigantic comedic celebration of DC's most popular superhero. Like some of the best comedic stuff from DC, this is a film that's filled with a lot of deep cuts and Easter eggs that all do a great job poking fun at various elements of Batman. I mean, they go through nearly everything from the Snyder films, Burton, Schumacher, Adam West. There's even some nods to the classic film serials of Batman. It's a nice little treat for longtime fans, but it also doesn't forget how to be a solid Batman movie that's just more comedic and filled with Legos.
You complete me.
As a Lego movie, it does still have the same animation style that I adore from these movies. They still manage to utilize so many different types of Legos for neat effects, and arguably it seems like they use it more with the amount of action set pieces that occur here. Though can't be a good Batman movie, even if it aims more for comedy without a great Batman. And my god, Will Arnett is a fantastic comedic Batman. He plays off the angst and comedic edginess very well, still delivering these lines like he's a proper Batman, showcasing that Will Arnett is excellent with comedic timing. He even has a kick-ass theme song in this version, filled with a lot of great jabs at the character, while having some great catchy lines that roll right off the tongue.
I get the last laugh, I get the final grin, throw you into the asylum with Harley Quinn.
Not only is Job a good Batman, but he's reunited with his nephew, George Michael, as Robin. Michael Cera is pretty funny as this geeky version of Robin, having some great back and forth between the fun father-son dynamic that Bruce and Dick Grayson have towards one another. The rest of the cast are all fun parody versions of so many different Batman characters, who serve as also decent versions of these characters all around, with Ray Fiennes as a good Alfred, Rosario Dawson is a pretty cool Barbara Gordon, and Zach Galifianakis plays a really funny version of the Joker. It's a good dynamic playing up the whole Joker secretly loving Batman, and it's really fun to see how he interacts with him here. There's even a great part where he turns into Aku from Samurai Jack, so that's neat.
I, Aku, the shape-shifting master of darkness, unleashed an unspeakable evil.
I guess if there's anything to note regarding the movie character-wise, you do get some other appearances from other DC characters, including some awesome Batman villains, but you don't really get to see too much of them. In fact, one could argue these characters could be utilized instead of the non-DC characters that were thrown into the mix. But I guess that adds to the Lego Movie's crossover element, and it at least makes sense for this film. It's not a deal breaker considering these DC villains still have some great jokes attached to them, and even some really neat casting. I mean, this is not only the first appearance as Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman 5 years before the Batman, but this is also the return of Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent, which shows that dreams do eventually come true in the most unlikely sort of ways. A solid cast all around that I also say, since it's Will Arnett, you can maybe see the same movie unfold, except with the casts of BoJack Horseman, and it'd still be hilarious. Think about it. Princess Carolyn as Alfred, Diane as Barbara Gordon, Todd as Robin, and Mr. Peanut Butter as the Joker. Come on, how can anyone not find the idea of BoJack and Mr. Peanut Butter as Batman and the Joker as a funny gag? I guess the last thing to note is that while this film is a ton of fun and an all-around excellent parody, it doesn't go as hard with its themes compared to other Lego movies. It's another film that's ultimately a message about finding your true family, which is kind of standard and par for the course regarding kids' films. Yet, considering the character it is, they executed well enough to feel very appropriate to The Dark Knight. Nothing groundbreaking, but it works, especially when you consider the fact that this film definitely accomplished its main goal very well. The Lego Batman movie is a hilarious and exciting comedic tribute to one of the best comic book characters of all time. If you haven't seen this, and if you're a DC fan like I am, then this is a must watch. Even if you're not the biggest fan of DC, it still stands out as a fun comedy and family film that I honestly say is a great introduction to Batman for younger audiences. Nothing much else to say, so I'll let Lego Batman be the one to summarize why this movie is so rad.
I'm Batman. To the floor. I'm Batman.
Alright, so I talked about some bad movies, okay movies, and some pretty good ones on this list. But now we get to the main stars, the iconic classics. The next 4 movies are not only the best on this list by far, but they are honestly the main reasons why I made this video in the first place. These next 4 movies completely highlight why I love animation, and now it's time to give them the respect they deserve. So without further ado,
let's show the world what we can do. Pudge?
hell yeah. I had to start out talking about some of my all-time favorite animated movies with this underrated classic. Cats Don't Dance is one of the most overlooked, yet also one of the most energetic and expressive animated films I have ever seen. This was done by Turner Animation, and was later turned into a Warner Brothers production after WB bought Turner out. Though unfortunately, this was a huge box office bomb due to poor marketing and timing from the studio. The good news is, since then, the film has gained a decent cult following over the years, mainly due to DVD and how many times it's been shown on Cartoon Network, which is how I first watched this movie, though it's still relatively obscure since it has yet to receive a proper streaming release or Blu-ray for that matter. And it absolutely should, because this movie is fantastic. Imagine crossing La La Land and Zootopia, and you get a movie that's every bit as fun and heartfelt as a cross between those movies would sound. The story deals with a cool cat,
hi everybody,
not
it's
that
me,
cool cat, named Danny, who always dreamed of going to Hollywood.
When we were in Hollywood, someone asked me to be in the
Not
Hollywood
that cool
parade.
cat! He finally gets his chance, only to realize that animals don't get the recognition that human stars do. But through his determination, he wants to change that, to get his animal friends and many others the recognition they deserve. It's a typical sort of story about prejudice and rising up to that, but the execution of it is outstanding. Starting off with the animation, as this is one of those movies I point to showing how beautifully expressive the medium can be. All the characters move in this very exaggerated cartoonish world, and it's so enticing to watch. It also helps that the dance choreography was done by legend Gene Kelly, which this was actually one of his last movie roles. Though it was a good send-off considering how larger than life the movement is during these musical numbers. The cast in this movie is also phenomenal, with Danny being an extremely likable lead. Some may say that's to a fault since he is a really nice character with not a lot of character flaws, but his determination and passion with helping not only just his dreams, but the dreams of so many others is such an admirable trait that I just can't help but love this cat. I love how his passion influences those around him, and it really ties into the whole theme of following your dreams no matter what anyone says. We also got a love interest, Sawyer, who's also fantastic. A more reserved character that contrasts really well with Danny. With her starting out in a worse place than him, it's great to see her being warmed up by Danny's optimism, and after so many times where she felt like giving up, she's the main character who goes through an arc and becomes quite compelling because of that. She's one of my favorite love interests in an animated film for that reason. I mean, look at these two. They're so cute together. The other side characters are also fun in their own right, as they all have their funny little quirks and moments, but the main standout outside of the leads, and arguably more so, is the film's villain. Darla Dimple is easily one of the best non-Disney animated villains I've seen. A very unique concept for a leading villain, with her being a child star with anger issues. But like Danny, she is also super expressive and determined, except in the most devilishly evil sort of way. The animators had a blast making this seemingly adorable little girl into this raging monster, and she even has a giant butler lackey named Max, who's also great contrast to her being threatening but in a more modest sort of way. She even has an incredible villain musical number that also deserves a spot as one of the most underrated and visually impressive villain songs. Oh, and you didn't think I would talk about this movie without discussing the music, right? The songs are done by Randy Newman, and along with Princess and the Frog, this is easily my favorite soundtrack of his. This movie definitely tries to recreate the classic Hollywood musical, and all the songs represent that feeling very well. Much like the movie itself, they're fast-paced, have a ton of energy to them, and just a joy to listen to. Danny's arrival song is a nice little melody, Sawyer's solo number is a great emotional ballad, the finale is bombastic, and there's of course my absolute favorite track in the entire movie, the Animal Jam. One of the most upbeat and lively musical numbers to appear in an animated film, and the whole use of muted colors turning bright as the melody goes on is just stunning to witness. It is truly a shame that such an incredible and fantastic movie has gone unnoticed by Warner Brothers with not even a Blu-ray release. But with it being 25 years old, I say we need to change that. So maybe instead of just wishing for it to get a Blu-ray or proper re-release, we should let Warner Brothers know that more people need to witness Cats Don't Dance in a much better light than it already is. So I'm starting a little campaign known as hashtag re-release Cats Don't Dance. Hey, it worked for the Snyder Cut, so why not here? And obviously I don't want this to go into anything toxic, so no harassing employees over this, but I feel like Warner Brothers should know and do something about this film. There is an audience for this movie, and I think the least we can do is ask for a re-release. Whether it gets an actual streaming release or just a Blu-ray, I just want Cats Don't Dance to make a comeback and to be remastered and recognized as the classic it deserves to be. So I don't think it's asking much. So join in on the hashtag if you too want to see this movie get the respect it deserves. Either way, Cats Don't Dance is a remarkable movie that truly is the definition of underrated for me. A movie that has animation this excellent, music this upbeat, and a theme about not giving up despite the world being against you in a compelling way should not go unnoticed. It is a must-see for animation and musical lovers like myself, and nothing is gonna stop me from loving it. See it if you have yet to.
Everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Everything is cool when you're part of it.
I don't want to sing the song.
Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we're living our dream.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we're living our dream.
Well, of course, you didn't think I would forget what might be, without a doubt, one of the top 5 best animated films of the 2010s, did you? The Lego Movie is every bit as awesome as this movie has been touted over the years. It's a movie that many would say is one of the most shockingly good movies out there. I can see why, given the idea of a movie about Legos seems like an easy cash grab. But even before that, when I saw that the directors attached to this movie were Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I was more like, wait, there's something to this. I mean, these are the guys that took Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, a children's book adaptation that's different from the book, and 21 Jump Street, a comedy that looked like a standard TV adaptation with Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum. These two managed to make both of these projects great, despite the low expectation. So with that in mind, I figured there's probably something they can bring to this Lego Movie that will make it have potential. Surely enough, not only did it turn out great like their previous 2 films, but what I didn't expect was possibly one of the most clever and creative animated films that has pretty much everything and more I could want from a film of this caliber. This is an animated film that's smarter than it has any right to be, and just about every aspect of this film works in some way. First off, the animation, and this is a bold claim, but this might be the best CGI animation I have ever seen. Yeah, f*** the Lion King remake. CGI animation looking photorealistic has peaked with this movie. I'm always in awe with how they really made all these textures in this movie look like how Legos actually look, all on a relatively lower budget, which astonishes me considering how many films that are more expensive that don't even come close to looking half as good as this film. The brilliant thing about the animation isn't just the fact that they gave these Legos realistic looking textures, but the whole idea of making them move like how they would in a stop motion animated film is genius. Whenever I saw Legos in CGI before, there was always something that looked off about them with the way they move. They moved too much like regular CGI Legos and moved too fluidly, which didn't quite fit the mold of Legos. Here, they actually look like legit Legos with how they move, and there's a lot of creativity in terms of emulating how this movie would pan out as a stop motion animated film, utilizing any type of Lego piece to help make this world of toys feel believable and fully realized. It's a gorgeous looking movie with so much color and energy packed into every solitary frame of this piece of work. But visuals aren't the only reason for a movie to be good. A film can still be visually stunning while not delivering on anything worth of substance. The Lego Movie is fortunately not a movie without substance. In fact, you might have one of the most clever and refreshing social commentary on creativity here. You get this mostly through a really fun cast of characters. Yeah, everyone loves to make fun of Chris Pratt being the voice in every animated movie now.
He's so cool.
But to his credit, he fits the incredibly naive but also fun Emmett very well. And he makes for a decent lead here too. Plus, you got a bunch of other fun characters that make this movie so bright, from small cameos to really fun ideas for characters. And the voice acting is also top notch on all fronts. The highlights for me are, of course, Lego Batman, who I don't really need to discuss any further since I already did that, and Morgan Freeman as Vitruvius, which, believe it or not, this is Morgan Freeman's only major animated film credit. Kinda surprising, but hey, a movie of this caliber deserves a little piece of literal God here.
Alright, you gotta write all that down because I'm not gonna remember any of it, but here we go.
This movie is also packed with so many jokes in every single frame. It's one of the many movies I tend to love where Multiple viewings can actually be beneficial with how much detail is packed here. Though most importantly, the reason why the Lego Movie sticks with me the most is just because of its all-around message. The ending scene between Emmett and Lord Business just sums up the idea of corporate capitalism is the downfall of creativity, which, yeah, maybe didn't expect that in this movie. The way Emmett has that powerful speech about Lord Business being mad that people are making things not his way, and it seems all disorganized, when in actuality, people are taking things he made and brought something new to it. It encourages the idea of creativity and free expression as something truly great and can be applied to any sort of art. The fact that they use a toy all about creating things and being creative is simply brilliant. How this movie wasn't nominated for Best Animated Feature is astonishing. No offense to George Miller, but this deserved to win for Warner Brothers way more than Happy Feet. At least Lord and Miller still won their Oscar years later for helping Spider-Verse come into existence, and they're still consistently some of my favorite talents in the animation and film industry. What else can I say about the Lego Movie? You know why this movie should have been nominated for Best Animated Feature. It's an outstanding piece of work. It's everything that I look for in an animated movie. It's one of the primary reasons I love the medium, and I owe it to the creative artists at Warner Brothers for help bringing this film into existence. What else can I really say about a movie where everything about it is awesome?
Everything is awesome when we're living our dreams.
Vengeance. I am the knight. I am Batman!
A comic book movie that deserves to be recognized as one of the all-time greatest. Batman: Mask of the Phantasm is one of the greatest films to ever be associated with the character. Then again, I expect no less from probably the best rendition of the character with Batman the Animated Series. No disrespect to my man Christopher Nolan, and even the other talented filmmakers who made a Batman movie, but Mask of the Phantasm is truly up there with The Dark Knight as top tier Batman movie. What makes it so great? Well, for starters, as a film rendition of one of the greatest animated shows of all time, they didn't have to go hard on this movie, but they did. We get a very personal and emotional drama with Bruce struggling with the idea of completely abandoning a normal life to become the hero Gotham deserves. It's compelling since the film beautifully showcases what Bruce could have had with the potential life he almost got after his parents' demise. He almost lived a life of peace and harmony with the person he loves, yet gave it all up in favor of the thing he lost. It's so fascinating to see him go through with it, since we want to see Bruce at peace, but can he really? Because what he does is commendable to anyone living in this hellscape of crime that Gotham provides, so they wouldn't have to suffer what Bruce had lost so tragically. It all makes for an excellent exploration of this character. Even if it does involve a tiresome origin at this point, the way it goes into why Bruce does what he does might be the best it's ever been handled in a Batman movie. Oh, and because it's Batman the Animated Series, they had no choice but to use Kevin Conroy. It worked out pretty well though, as this makes Kevin Conroy the best film version of Batman. No disrespect to my other boys who have put on the mask and cape over the years, but you can't really top this voice for this character. Conroy and Mark Hamill's voices are what I think of when I read a Batman comic featuring these iconic characters. Which reminds me, the Joker is in this movie played by Mark Hamill, and that also makes him possibly the best film version of the Joker too. As fantastic as these other actors who have portrayed him were. His appearance isn't too prominent since he doesn't appear until about the third act, since we mostly get a focus on the main antagonist, which is the Phantasm itself. himself, who is another really creepy and effective villain, especially for how they end up tying into the actual plot of this movie. Though they still manage to give the Joker some great material here, as the character is still every bit of dementedly evil as we love seeing this character be, even leading to some very epic moments. While the story and characters are fantastic, I can't ignore some of the other elements that make this film feel so much like an epic gothic drama as a Batman movie should be. First being the animation, which granted might be a slight upgraded version of what the animated series was. You're still getting a visually stunning movie that relishes in its Art Deco aesthetic and just fits the exact tone this movie is trying to go for. In other words, even if it is a slight upgrade from the show, it's still an upgrade from one of the best looking animated shows of the 90s. So you're still getting something good. And last but certainly not least, I want to address the other true factor that makes this movie such a masterpiece, which is the soundtrack, composed by the late Shirley Walker from the original show. Mask of the Phantasm still uses a lot of the music we expect from a great show, just maybe on a bigger scale. But I say more so because, well... You know, they didn't have to go this hard on the soundtrack, but they did. They managed to give us a score that adds so much emotion and character to this tragedy. This is the kind of epic choir you would hear in something like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Lord of the Rings. This is the kind of epicness that truly defines cinema in the best way possible, and it's perfect. Well, almost. For as much as I praise and worship this movie for how perfect it is, which it is, there is one tiny little complaint I have with this movie. It is ultimately a nitpick, but it's something that bothers me to no end. So, you have this god tier score with such a grand choir attached to it, making you feel as big and epic of a movie as you want a Batman movie of this caliber to be. And what did they use as the end credits song for this film? Why? Why the fuck is this the end credits song? Seriously, this may be the worst unfitting end credits song I have ever heard for an animated feature. Side note, if there's one thing I tend to hate about older animated films, is how 90% of them felt the need to have a lame R&B song attached to it, when the movie itself was perfectly fine with a musical score or traditional song of its own. It always felt cheesy and unneeded. Even as a kid, I thought this. But this one in particular is the worst because there is literally no reason for the song to be here. Especially when you have such an amazing score attached to it. Why this dumb R&B that feels completely out of place for this movie? I'll never understand it, but outside of that, this movie is pretty much perfect. If there's one thing people may point out is that it does feel like a slight upgrade to the show. That might be true to an extent, but considering this is an upgrade to what already is one of the best shows ever made, I don't consider it to be a bad thing at all. Batman Mask of the Phantasm truly is an enthralling and gripping adaptation of the character. Still up there as one of the top 3 best DC films of all time, if you ask me. While there might be one other film that tops it on this list, The Dark Knight foray into the animation world is a perfect choice to be this high on the best animated features that Warner Brothers has ever done. A must-see for anyone who loves animation and Batman in general. A truly remarkable piece of cinema right here.
So I came back to Warner Brothers in front of the heads of the movie division and said, I have a different take on it. What if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun?
If if there's any film that is a defining one for not only Warner Brothers animation, but for the entire medium of animation, it is The Iron Giant. I'll never forget witnessing seeing this movie in theaters and how it garnered my love for animation. And since then, this film has gotten even better and better in my eyes. It is ultimately a familiar story. It's the E.T. tale of a creature from another world coming to Earth, befriends a kid, and realizes the importance of having a heart while avoiding the government, who sees the creature as a threat. Simple premise, yet the execution done here by Brad Bird and his team is so magnificent, so utterly brilliant, that it trumps anything that was already established in the genre by E.T. It's easily the best version of this story, and I can't think of a single movie that does this exact plot better than this. Okay, Lilo and Stitch comes very, very close, but Iron Giant is slightly better in my opinion. This film gets so many things right in terms of story and as a film. Starting with the animation, which is absolutely incredible here. This is very much a Brad Bird film in terms of designs, and seeing these characters work with this smooth animation makes this film feel very alive. Very colorful in general, great use of backgrounds that really help make this period piece very authentic to the 50s. And the Giant himself is one of the best CGI characters to ever appear in a 2D animated film. 90% of the time, even the best animated films will always have that one brief moment where a character or thing is very obviously CGI and sticks out compared to the other characters. Here though, the Giant is a big character, so I get why CGI is accomplished for him, but he's also cel shaded enough to where he fits in seamlessly with the other characters and the world they're in. Outside of the Giant, this film just has a fantastic cast. Relatively small, but every character is memorable. Hogarth Hughes is such an endearing protagonist, a bit of a rebel as far as young kids go, but he has a true heart and compassion for those around him. The way he interacts with the Giant is so believable when you see how a good-natured kid like him could ultimately help the Giant understand his world better. His mom is also pretty nice too. Not too much to say, but she's a pretty kind and hard-working mother coming from a pretty understanding place throughout most of the film. You also can't go wrong with the main antagonist. Kent Mansley isn't the most threatening or maliciously evil villain out there, but still serves as a great foil. He has such a smug personality, yet is so determined to get what he wants that he becomes very entertaining to watch. He already has such a distinct design and is so well expressive and voiced so great by Chris McDonald, making this a very funny character all around. Last but certainly not least, you have Dean.
We like Dean.
How could you not? This is one of the most chilled, laid-back dudes in animation history. Not only that, but he's also very passionate about art and how he creates it, which is something very reflective of the film's own director, Brad Bird. That's the thing I love about him as a talent. This is a guy who truly understands the importance of animation and wants it to receive the respect it deserves. You could see it in just this film alone, as Brad Bird has such a strong sense of directing, still treating this like it's an actual film rather than just a kid's film. It may not have the maturity as his later two Pixar movies, yet he still manages to make it not feel like a kid's movie at all. That's because Brad Bird understands how to treat his audience with respect by making it a very insightful movie for kids watching it. It was a film that was inspired by tragic violence and the theme of having something designed to kill, learning to have that sense of empathy. The whole Souls Don't Die sequence might be one of the deepest and emotionally powerful moments in any animated film, made for kids or otherwise. How it tackles the theme of death in such a powerful way so kids can comprehend is a bold move. Just because an animated movie is made for kids doesn't mean they have to treat them like idiots and make it insufferable for adults. Animated movies can be taken seriously in the same vein of any of the greatest live action films. Not only is The Iron Giant a good indication of this, so is the making of special feature that's on the Blu-ray. It's possibly the best behind the scenes featurette to any movie if you ask me, for how it really showcases the passion that went on during the making of this film. Brad Bird's whole personality of wanting to have animation be respected for what it is definitely makes it a very compelling watch. Yet at the same time, this making of documentary shows the brutal honesty behind it all as well. This was not an easy movie to work on, and that's namely due to a lot of clashing between the creative forces and producers of this film in terms of what the story should be. It's a film that ultimately led to a tragic fate, as The Iron Giant was a box office failure thanks to a lack of marketing and push behind it. It was clear that Warner Brothers really didn't know that what they had was something special, and it does honestly show that higher up execs just don't see what animation can do. This film, like many other animated films, should have gotten more recognition for exploring the medium and being as equally valid as a form of storytelling than some of the greatest live action movies. To see stuff like this happen in the mix of other things like animation studios not being able to get the projects they want funded, live action remakes trying to pass themselves off as better versions of animated films when they're clearly just insulting, and just the whole rhetoric of animation being nothing more than just movies made for kids and nothing else can be really disheartening for an animation fan. Artists and creative talent should never be put under the bus, and to see this happen so much can make people who adore the craft feel very alone in this world. But does it always have to be that way? And is it always like this? To answer that question, not always. Because even in the mix of the worst animation news, animation can still prevail thanks to the ones who see it as the art form it is. Not just the animators, not just people like Brad Bird, but anyone who watches an animated movie and can see how important it is as an art form. I'll never forget seeing The Iron Giant at a young age in theaters, as it really sparked a true appreciation of the art form in me, and my love for the film has grown since. I think others share the same sentiments, as those who saw Iron Giant knew it wasn't just a film to be ignored. Now, thanks to those who saw it and shared it around to other friends and families, along with more exposure thanks to DVD, streaming, and TV network airings, The Iron Giant at this point is now recognized as a bona fide classic. There's a reason why it's stuck with so many people over the years despite its rocky start, because true art and cinema will never truly die. The Iron Giant is definitive proof that animation impact to the emotions of so many people is something truly special to behold. It's a film that showcases, much like a soul, animation, no matter how hard people try to discredit it, will never truly die due to the influence of those who know how it can strike a chord with anyone, regardless of who they are. So take that for what it's worth.